welcome to the Roker Report Lasses podcast in association with Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen and Her Game Too, the campaign against sexism and misogyny in football. My name's Rich Speight and I'm delighted to be joined for this first interview podcast of the new pod by Gemma Wilson, who was a Sunderland legend, played for Sunderland for many years in the 2000s and 2010s. She was a centre-back all the way through our time in the WPL and then into the WSL, formed a fantastic centre-back partnership with Steph Bannon and is our first interview guest. So how are you this morning, Gemma?
I'm good, yeah. It's nice to be talking about football instead of kind of the usual day job these days, so it's glad to be here.
Yeah, and it's an exciting time for Sunderland fans. I think we've both got our tickets, but we'll talk about that at the end for Wembley on Saturday. But you're a massive Sunderland fan, aren't you? You're originally from South Shields, is that right?
Born in South Shields, but kind of grew up my whole life in Washington, yeah.
All right. And so I guess supporting Sunderland is just a big family tradition, is it?
So my dad's side of the family are all Sunderland fans. My mum's side of the family, there's only really me mum and one of our brothers are Sunderland fans. The rest of them are Newcastle fans because she's from like the Jarrow, Hebburn kind of area.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as long as I remember going to Roker Park, and back then it was like my dad would just lift us over the turnstiles rather than actually pay for us to go. But yeah, great memories of Roker Park. As a mascot actually for I think it was my 7th birthday. I think it was against Bolton on Boxing Day. It was great. I mean, just loved Roker Park. Absolutely loved it. Yeah,
what end were you? Were you a Roker end, a full end, a clock stand, paddock?
No, I think we were. To be honest with you, my dad would just go wherever. I mean, he just used to go in. But generally speaking, we were in the full end.
Yeah, I ended up in the full end. Started sitting behind the goal in the Roker end, but then as soon as I was big enough to see, I was in the full end in amongst it.
Yeah. I just remember I couldn't see because I think when the Stadium of Light opened, it was 97, wasn't it? So I'll have been 9 going on 10. So at Roker Park, my dad used to basically just hold us up, so I was at his kind of height, so I could see over people. So
you grew up football mad then, and playing all the time, playing with local kids in around Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all my friends growing up, if I'm honest with you, until we kind of got closer to secondary school, were all boys. It was just a case they were the group, really, my age group around where I lived. So it was always football. And my older sister was very girly girl. So I think my dad wouldn't have handled if he didn't have somebody who was interested in sport and interested in football. So I think it was my destiny, I think, to be involved in football.
So how did you get started at Sunderland as a player? How did you get noticed? What was your kind of journey into playing more formally than just having to kick around with the lads in your local area?
So really, there wasn't really a lot around when I was a kid for girls. It was a case of find a team, any team, and see if you can get involved in it. But in terms of joining Sunderland, we were, so when I say we, it's kind of myself, the likes of Jill Scott, Steph Horton, Carly Telford, we were all kind of part of that very first Centre of Excellence. Mm-hmm. So Sunderland set up their Centre of Excellence, and it was a case of they just had open trials. So I think it was me mum actually, she saw it somewhere and she just put my name down for it, took me along, and that's how I got involved. So I joined the under 10s. I was 10, I joined the under 12s, and then it was the under 14s. And back then it was, you didn't have to be 16 to join the women's setup. It was, you only had to be 14. So at the point of turning 14, myself and Steph Horton were asked by Mick Mulhern at the time to go and join the women's team. And this probably puts into context actually Sunderland and what the club really means to the likes of me and Steph, and to be fair, all the players now. But I'd literally just been having a conversation with my parents about joining a women's team. It was rear rolls, because the Centre of Excellence back then, it was kind of, you had one game, one tournament a year, and it was down in Warwick. So you'd get up at stupid o'clock in the morning, you'd travel down to Warwick, and then you travel back, and that was pretty much your season done from a young player's point of view. So you had to join other clubs as well. So I asked my mum about joining a women's team. She's like, no, you're 14, you're far too young, your body won't handle it, you can't do that. And then as soon as Sunderland asked if I would join, I was like, yeah, absolutely, no problem, let's go. So it was Sunderland were always kind of seen in that different light, I think, from me and with my family.
I always find it fascinating that, you know, the much kind of younger age that women have come through into the game.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to look at kind of like the impact that had, because a lot of you's kind of retired reasonably young as well. Something we might go into a bit later on. But you've obviously, you know, you came through with those now kind of like legends of the game in terms of like Steph and Jill and people like that. But you developed into a centre back. Was that always your position? Were you always kind of defensively minded, or were you one of these kids who's kind of a bit like Steph, dropped back through the team as you developed?
It's a good question. So I think if I described myself now, I would say I was a really old-fashioned centre half. It was my buzz came from winning a header that I really shouldn't have been winning, or blocking a shot, or getting stuck into a 50-50 tackle. So if you ask me now, I'd probably say I was always a defender. I mean, I was very defensively minded, but I actually started off with Sunderland as a right back, and I just used to bomb up and down the right hand side. Probably not that great, if I'm honest with you, going forward. There used to be a running joke that if I stepped over the halfway line, I'd get a nosebleed. So even as a right back, really, it was about the defensive side of the game. So it was always kind of natural that I was then going to move into centre half, I think. But like at the point of joining the women's team at 14, there were really established players, really good players. The likes of Jen O'Neill, who does She Kicks. Mm-hmm. There was Emma Redhead, Leslie. There's some really established players playing at centre half. So it's kind of just biding my time, really, and doing a job for the team. But I think really I was always a centre half in the making. Very, very defensive focused.
So you will have broken into the team then, I guess, when in about 2001. Well, that's when you joined as a 14-year-old. Was it straight into the team, or as you said, did you have to bide your time?
So it was straight into the setup, but I had a season with the reserves. Right. It was, and to be honest with you, I think it was absolutely what I needed. It was. All of the girls were lovely, don't get me wrong, but I think as a 14-year-old kid going into it, it's quite intimidating I haven't finished grown in terms of height. I'm very, very small physically, and I think in a defensive position, I needed that year to kind of prepare myself to be up against kind of fully grown women who've been playing the sport for probably longer than I'd been born at that point.
So what was the leagues that you were playing in then? It was the FA kind of National League North?
Yeah, so there was the National League, there was the Northern Premier League. It kind of like, they changed the name a bit, to be honest with you, but it kind of fluctuated between a National League and a Northern League.
And Sunderland at that time were kind of bouncing between the two, weren't they, when you first broke in? Yeah. They were kind of the upper echelons of the Northern, and then kind of trying to get established in the National. Later in the decade, I guess, is when you came to the fore, when the team came to the fore, when those kind of younger players, and then you had Lucy Bronze and people like that coming into the squad as well, is when really the glory years of Sunderland women's football kind of started. Obviously, you had the FA Cup run in 2009, but before that, was there a kind of a feeling amongst the squad that you had this kind of group of really talented local players who really could do something?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think if you talk to anybody from around that time, I think we'd all be really honest to say that we were never the best technical team. But what we lacked in terms of that tactical ability or technical ability, because we were so young and we were developing, we more than made up for in that desire and that hunger to do well and do well for the club. I mean, you see things knocking about all the time now, don't you, about like Sunderland family, Chelsea family, all this sort of thing. But and it's probably a bit of a biased view, but I genuinely think we were really the first kind of club who took that, and it wasn't one of those cliches. It was a genuine. Everybody at the club, loved each other, and would do anything to back each other up. Whether that was on the pitch or off the pitch, we spent a lot of time with each other, and that sense of we had that, and then we saw all of these really young, hungry players coming through, who were some of the best. Technically some of the best players, and actually in terms of being athletes were some of the best players that I personally had ever come across, especially at their age. The likes of Lucy, I think Lucy took a little bit longer to really kind of realise a potential, but it was always there and you could see it in her, and I think she had a little bit of a spell in America, and then she came back and she was a different player. She was absolutely outstanding. And I think Jordan Nobbs, if you asked me one player who I knew would make it, it was Jordan.
Yeah.
And I'm devastated the injuries that she's had, because she was then, and I think when she gets a run and she gets that fitness, she is one of the best players in the world. Yeah. Forget England, she's one of the best players in the world, and it's just a shame that she kind of seems to get these injuries around those peak tournaments as well.
Yeah, she's just picked one up, and she's got such a sweet right foot as well. You know, don't think there's anyone quite like her in terms of like being able to strike the ball. And she's a really, really great player. And just looking back at all clips of back then as well, she was, always on the end of things, wasn't she? She was always, getting in the box, and really, really, really great football. And it has been a shame that she won't be, or may well not be, at the Euros because of this latest injury.
Yeah,
but
it's one of those where I think that there's some aspects of the game that you can train into people, but there are some aspects of the game that are just, they're within certain players, and that ability to read the game and that football intelligence is something that the likes of Jordan, Lucy Stan as well. I'd put Lucy Stanforth in that as well. They had that, and it was already built in them. It was then just about working around that to make sure that they met the potential that was already there. Yeah,
certainly, and those players were with you on that 2009 Cup run.
Yeah.
You missed the final itself, didn't you? But
I did.
Were you involved in the run itself? Did you play at the stadium
I did.
Against Chelsea?
I did, yes. So I missed the final because I was suspended. So I was sent off, and I'll not go into it, but I was sent off for something that I've never seen anybody sent off for before, and I've never seen anybody sent off for since. But the suspension started on the Sunday and the final was the Monday. But I was involved in kind of the quarter, the whole run up really, but I was just coming back from injury, and so I came on as a sub in the quarter final against Bristol, played the semi-final against Chelsea at the stadium, and then obviously missed the final itself.
That must have been a kind of a bit of a dream come true, that semi. It
was amazing.
One of the greatest days in your career?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that nobody gave us any chance. And it was one of those where I think everybody looking at it wanted an Arsenal-Chelsea final. Mm-hmm. And I think Chelsea themselves I think they thought they were already there. And we just had that togetherness that I was talking about earlier. We had that. And we went into that game absolutely knowing that was our day. We knew we had that full belief that if we did what we knew we could do, we would turn them over. And it proved it. I think that I would love to see the footage of the game back. Someone must have it recorded somewhere. But it was just one of those things where everything went our way. Any loose ball, we were first to it. Any 50-50, we came out with the ball. We had an opportunity, we put it in the net. It was one of those days where everything went our way.
Yeah, and obviously just for those who might not kind of know the history, Chelsea, I think, were second in the top flight at the time. Sunderland were top of the second tier. So obviously 2 teams in really, really good form, and it must have been an amazing game. It's one that, if it happened now, there would be headlines all over about it. Yeah. I've scratched around to find information about it in the lead up to this. Obviously, I was aware of it at the time, but there was no streaming, there was no radio commentary or anything like that. So it's really nice to hear about it. I'll not go too deep into the final itself, because it must be really painful for you to have been suspended in that kind of fashion. But they did themselves really proud, didn't they, on that? You watch it back, and obviously, the Arsenal team was out of this world. You look down the list of names, it's kind of scary, really. But Sunderland really did kind of dig in and took them all the way, didn't they? It was a fantastic. I guess absolutely. It was a fantastic day.
It was a really. Do you know what it was? It was just a fantastic occasion, and we went into that game with belief. So, I mean, although I wasn't kind of in the game, I was still around the squad. I was still kind of the club tried to make me part of it as much as could. So that they got me my number 6 shirt with the name and embroidered with the match details, etc. I was away with the team the day before. I wasn't actually allowed in the stadium until spectators were, but everything leading up to that, I was there and I was part of it, and there really was that sense of this could be our day. I think Chelsea, we absolutely knew we've got this. We're going to an FA Cup final. It was just we had to get through the 90 minutes and get it done. But I think even going into that Arsenal game, there was so much belief within the squad. Like you say, we had the likes of, we had Demi Stokes, we had Jordan Nobbs, we had Lucy Bronze, we had Lucy Stan. We had a core down the middle of kind of, we had Vicky G, Steph Bannon, Kelly McDougall, Natalie Guttridge. We had that spine of players who had that experience as well as that mix of youth in there as well. And it was, I mean, if you looked at the stats in terms of possession, chances, that sort of thing, yes, it looks like Arsenal dominated it. But if you look at the game and analyse it, they had all of that, but they didn't really look like they were going to get more than the 2 goals that they had. And I think that for Kelly to get that, what obviously turned out to be a consolation goal in the end, but to get that and the game finished 2-1, I think that was almost like a marker of our intent for the next season. And it really gave... The result was one thing, but actually what that game was more about was we'd seen off Bristol, who were the league above us in the quarterfinals. We saw off Chelsea, who were the league above us in the semi-finals. And then we were pitting ourselves against Arsenal, who, I mean, they lose kind of once in a blue moon. So for us to push them that far was really a sign of what we were capable of achieving in the coming years.
Totally, and what you did achieve was promotion to the Women's Premier League National 1, the kind of the top level. Finished in 5th, winning 12 games the next season. So you must have come into that flying, really. Looking at, that record, really able to hold your own against those kind of top flight teams who'd been around for a while, as you say, your Bristols and Chelsea's and Arsenal's. Was a great season. And one of the things, obviously, that must have been lingering in the background was again the kind of the reorganisation of football once again. So what do you make of that kind of 2009-10 season up in the top flight?
Oh, that season has so many mixed emotions tied up in it. I think the Super League and the news of the Super League application kind of came towards the end of it, but everything leading up to that was just so... It was amazing. So, I mean, to kind of go back in time a little bit, when I first joined the women's set up and kind of we didn't have any of the background from the men's club and that sort of thing, it was... We used to look at the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, and we used to kind of think, right, if we keep this scoreline below double figures, we've done all right here. So if we draw them in the cup game or we we have them in. I mean, we never played them in the league at that point. But if we get them in the cup game, we'll just travel down on the morning of, because it'll be cheaper than an overnight stay. We'll keep it below double figures, and we've done a good job. So to go from that kind of place where we were as a club, as a squad, to then getting to where we were with the FA Cup final the year before, and then pitting ourselves against these teams and actually going down there, or them coming to us and looking for a result, not looking to contain it, but looking to come out with 3 points. It was a massive shift in mentality and culture within the club, and it was a sign of actually how far we had come. And actually that season was that we did beat Arsenal when they came up. So we beat Arsenal 2-1, and I think that was their only defeat that year in the league. And I think it was something like only the second time they'd lost domestically in something like 6 years. They had an insane record. But again, that was one of those things where we knew and we trusted who was alongside us, who was in front of us, who was behind us. So you knew that if you made a mistake, you had 2-3 players who were there to pick it up. And like I say, we had that core through the spine of the team of kind of that experience. And I say experience, but it wasn't necessarily that they were older players. Mm-hmm. I mean, so we're talking about experience, but I think at that time there was probably the likes of myself, Steph. We were probably, me and Steph, other than Kelly, I think we were, and Vicky G, we were probably the oldest players, and we were kind of 20 kind of age. I mean, it wasn't old, but because of the way the women's game was set up back then, that was experienced. But we had that spine, and then we had the youth and the flair around us as well, and it was just an amazing year. We would travel to Arsenal, we'd travel to Everton, we have Arsenal coming up, and we'd be getting results against these teams, and if we weren't, we were really disappointed with the outcome. And again, it was just that we were all in it together, and we really were that family unit. But then obviously we got the news of the Super League. Parents were running the club at the time, so we had our parents going back and forwards to meetings with the FA about what the league was going to be, how it was going to be set up, how you would get into it, and that whole bid and tender process. And then it was on the back end of the season we found out that we were unsuccessful. And it did put a dampener on things, because the younger players, the likes of Jordan and Lucy, they were kind of thinking, well, for me to progress, do I need to leave? For my career to go to the next level, have I got to go somewhere else now? And what I would say is that it did put a dampener on the season, but what it didn't do was put a dampener on kind of that togetherness. Yeah. Because those of us who kind of understood that for us, football was only ever going to really be a hobby, versus the likes of the players I've mentioned, it was potential to be a career for those people, and we understood that. So whatever the decision had been at the end of the season, I think everybody supported it. I mean, I know that I had conversations with a couple of them. I know Steph did, Kelly did, and it was, I think we all had that understanding of what that would potentially mean for us as a club at the end of the year. But it did put a bit of a dampener on it, but it was one of those things that it was half expected at the same time.
That's really interesting, actually, to kind of get that insight into what was going on and the different kind of career paths, and where people saw their futures, either kind of, as you say, as amateur or part-time players, or as kind of doing it as a full-time professional at the elite level, and those players having to move on. But Sunderland kept going, kept winning every season in the Women's Premier League for 4 years in a row, winning the league, before eventually getting promoted. Again, there was one more opportunity for when the WSL was expanded. We finished top of the league. Business case went in alongside Man City, who unsurprisingly were chosen.
Yes.
Again, I just want to get your perspective. I know, where was it in terms of the support that you were getting, or the club was getting, from the wider Sunderland AFC during that kind of period when, before we were in WSL2, when we're still in Women's Premier League and still winning it every year? What was the support from Sunderland AFC like at that point?
It was better than it had been in previous years, absolutely 100%. And I think that it kind of, The improvement in support of the club kind of coincided with when Quinny came in, in that higher capacity within the club. Because, I mean, going back to when we kind of dropped in those kind of Bob Murray days, there was actually a period where we weren't even allowed to use the Sunderland badge. So we had actually created our own badge. We had looked for sponsors. We were looking at whether Nike would supply us with kits, whether like Diadora or who would supply us with a kit. Where could we play? How would we get there? What would the badge look like? And we had all of this and we designed it all, and kind of at the 11th hour the club came in and said, right, okay, we'll give you the strips, we'll give you the shirts. So I mean, to go from that to where we were through those Premier League years was actually a massive step forward. So the club did support us with tracksuits. They would give us a training, I think they gave us a sweatshirt, a rain jacket, the strips obviously. And they would support us and pay for the travel as well, which was kind of a massive thing. I remember one year we before the club really did that, we turned up to the Academy of Light to get on the bus to go down to Watford, and it was a double decker. So it was one of those things. I mean, I know the club didn't really like us to say it, and I know Mick Mulhern hated it when we said it, but we had this little running joke within the squad that we were like the flying horse. We were like a pub team. We were the flying horse. That was us. And then we rocked up, and there was this I think it was orange as well. I think it was a bright orange double decker to go down to Watford, and it kind of summed us up at that point. You know, it was an experience, but it sounds daft, but it was things like that actually helped bring us together and really helped with that team spirit. And I mean, there were funny stories. There was like the coaches down on the bottom floor, we were up on the top deck, thinking, like looking at bridges as we come in and thinking, oh my god, are we going to fit underneath that? And it was daft, but it made the days go by. But it was a great time, to be honest with you. The club, I'm not sure what more they could have done for us at that point, because we were stuck where we were. We couldn't progress anywhere. Would players have come to us even if the club had kind of invested so that we could buy players? Probably not, because the clubs above would have taken them to go and play in a semi-professional league rather than the leagues that we were in. So kind of over the years, there's a lot that the club has done, and we could point the finger at and say it wasn't good enough. Did it hinder the progress of the women's game in the Northeast? But I think at that time, they probably did what was reasonable based on where we were as a club and what we had the potential to be as a club, because of the restrictions that were placed on us by the FA and that whole league structure. But I think that, I mean, it all has to be given in context, doesn't it? And I think that if you look at the women's game and you look at what has been going on in the women's game in the Northeast in particular, although it wasn't always great, I think Sunderland probably did the most for the women's game in the Northeast. So yeah, I mean, could it have been better? Yeah, absolutely it could have. But could it have been better at that particular time? I'm not entirely sure it would have made much difference at that time with the league structures.
Yeah, no, it is interesting to get that perspective from somebody on the inside of, like, because I know as a kind of a fan watching from afar, talking to my dad who would go down every week, it was frustrating that we didn't seem to be able to progress. But what it did give us is the opportunity to like win every year and to get some really glorious really glorious moments. And I think like kind of the one thing I really wanted to speak to you about was the double in 2012. Where we kind of, had an amazing season and then kind of got to the last couple of weeks and it was, winning the league 1 week and then the League Cup final at Northampton against Leeds. I think Leeds were our closest kind of rivals at the time, and came away with the double. What was that kind of just that 2 week period? Must have been mad and really, really memorable.
Do you know what it is? Like, I feel a bit guilty for saying it, but it's a little bit of a blur, to be honest with you. I remember the other stuff more than I actually remember that. I think Do you know, when we're talking about kind of that, everything that happened with the club and the WSL and not getting in there, I think we need to remember Leeds in that as well.
Yeah.
So that year when we finished 5th in the it wasn't the WSL, it was the then National Premier League. We finished 5th and Leeds finished 4th, and neither of us were accepted into the WSL. So we had sort of 2 of the best 5 teams in the country really relegated into a league below. So it was us competing against each other for quite a while through that entire period, really. And if it wasn't us winning things, it was Leeds winning things. And that season, I think we did the double over them in the league. And the league itself was very, very tight. I think we pipped them to the title by about 1 point in the end. It was very, very close season. And you would go into every game with Leeds and you knew you were going to have a battle. It was going to be physical. It was going to be a really hard-fought game. It was going to be chances either side. And a lot of the time it was who could hold their nerve the most, because there was going to be... I say there was going to be chances, but there weren't really clear-cut chances. We matched each other up really well, and it was who could take that opportunity when it did come. And I remember winning the league, and I remember getting ready for the cup final. And our captain, Steph Bannon, I think she'd done her MCL. Leading up to that run-in. And we were crowned champions, and then she missed the League Cup final because she had that knee injury. So kind of similar to me with the FA Cup, it was kind of Steph had been involved in it all the way through and then missed that last opportunity to be involved in it. But the game itself, I mean... I don't have ginger hair, but I definitely have the ginger gene. And it was a scorching hot day, and I remember my face was burning. And it was, I think it was Beth Mead's first season with us, actually. Was it Beth Mead's? I think it might have been Beth Mead's first season with us. And if I remember right, I think she was playing on the right wing rather than up front. And I remember a twisty little face, because Beth always wanted to be in and around the goals. I mean, she'd do whatever she needed to do for the team, and she still does. You ask her to do a job and she'll do it. But really, she wanted to be up front, and she wanted to be scoring the goals. And I think to ask her to play on the right wing in the cup final, I mean, I found it hilarious seeing her face, but I don't think she found it that funny. But she had a little mini sulk. I don't think she'd mind me saying it too much. But then it came to the game, and I mean, ever the professional, she just put her head down. She did the job that she needed to do for the team. And it was another one of those where I think that whatever team we've had, it's had people who loved the badge. And again, it was just about that grit and that fight to put your body on the line, get stuck in, do what needed to be done, do the stuff that wasn't the pretty stuff, but it would get the results. And that was just kind of the mentality we had as a squad back then. It was always just do what you have to do, and worry about the rest later. And the day itself, I remember it was 2-1, and that last 5 minutes was so nervy. It was one of those, Joe, I was just like, right, just get the ball. If the ball's up the other end of the pitch, they can't go in our net. It was just get rid of it. And when the ref blew the whistle, it was kind of... I think it was that release, to be honest with you. I think we'd been so close to achieving so much over such a long period of time to then get the double and do it with the group of girls who kind of we were doing it with. Well, like I say, where we were all friends, we would go out together, we would go for meals, we'd go out drinking together. It was like that togetherness, and to do it with a group of girls who you genuinely enjoyed spending time with. It wasn't just a case of you had to suffer it while you were on the pitch together. It was nice to do it with that kind of group.
Yeah, totally. And you can see that in the pictures. You can see that. I love the picture of I think, is it Lawsy spraying everyone with champagne as Kelly McDougall and Steph with her leg kind of all wrapped up in a brace, lifting the cup. That's, I think, really like an evocative image, and I think it'd be nice to get a nice big mural of that somewhere. That's one of my ambitions.
Do you know what it is? Some of the pictures you have put on the Twitter account, I've never seen them before. They were brilliant to see them over the past week or so.
Hanging around on the Getty archive for a long time.
But I'm going to have a look. Yeah.
Nice to be able to get them out there, really, and celebrate the history of the club. But it didn't stop there, did it? I mean, obviously, did eventually get a place in the WSL structures. 2013-14 in WSL2, up against, I think, Durham in that season as well.
Yeah.
Just started out and started obviously with a couple of good games against Durham, beating them twice, I think, in a short space of time, which is always nice. There was that one where Beth Mead was right up in their keeper's face after scoring a pen.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? That sums Beth Mead up. At that time, that really just summed Beth Mead up. She was like so cheeky and in your face, and she really played on the edge of what was okay to do.
It's hilarious. I love that clip. It's one of my favourites from the archives. But going all the way through that season, Sunderland looked pretty indomitable in some ways, really confident, came all the way through, got to that game at Millwall in the end, and did you know by that point that you were up, or was it?
No.
I
think we had to have the result on the day.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it's very rare. So all those things that we've achieved, it was very rare for us to do it ahead of schedule. It always it almost felt like it always went down to the 11th hour.
That's very Sunderland, that, isn't it? Doesn't matter, men's, women's.
Yeah.
That's
never a dull moment, is there?
You know that Wembley is not going to be 3-0 at a canter on Saturday.
Oh, absolutely not. It'll be nerve-wracking, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, it probably, when I look back at the seasons, it probably wasn't really like that, but when you were involved in it, it really felt like that. Like every result right up until the final whistle on the final day of the season, it always felt like you had to get the result. And part of that was because actually that was the mentality of the squad, and that was kind of driven by the players themselves. It was driven by the parents who were helping us run it and kind of wanting to give something back to them, as well as kind of the coach and staff. Like we had Mick, over the years we've had Mick, Trevor, Mel's come back as a coach. She was a player back in the day when I first joined as well. We've had people who've been involved in the club because they love the club, whether that's the playing staff, whether that was the people helping them run the club in terms of the parents or even the coaching staff. It was, everybody was there because they wanted to be there. And I think that's been a massive factor in our success as a club, actually. And that season was no different. It was a case of, right, we've got an opportunity now in WSL2. Let's go and prove a point that we should have been here all along. I mean, WSL2 didn't exist to start with, but let's just go and make a point that we're ready. So when we do get accepted, I mean, we didn't know we would get up into WSL1. We didn't know whether we would be shut down, whether you'd not be allowed to go up. We had that kind of situation, as you alluded to previously, when Man City went up, when we had won the league. So there was never a certainty, but it was kind of always that mentality of, well, let's prove our point, let's prove our worth, and when the opportunity comes, we'll be ready for it. And that season really was just another case of that. Yeah,
and boy, were you ready for it when you went up. I mean,
yeah.
Top of the league after the first part of the season, in that kind of that 2014-15 season. Obviously had Mido scoring for fun, had a really solid team that, looked really hard to break down, and was pulling out results all over the place against, some of the really established names. Again, just must have been a bit like that 2010 season. It's just been really exciting to be in amongst that kind of elite and really pushing it and really kind of mixing it and getting some amazing results and some great goals as well.
Joe, we had some absolutely amazing goals, some amazing. I always remember Chelsea at Hetton.
Yeah.
And Mido's just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just one of those things where it was her day, and it didn't matter what happened. It was her stage. It was one of those where.
Had she been in a car crash like just before it as well? Something like that.
She had. Yeah. It was kind of one of those where just like, I think Beth was always one of those players. So Joe, I was saying earlier that I think that when we had the likes of Jordan, etc., I think from Jordan's very first day training with us, I think everybody could see, right, she's going to make it. She's got that next step. And I think when Beth came to us, we could all see the potential. It was just whether or not she could see that potential and whether she could take it to the next stage and kind of that maturity to take it to the next stage. She loved to laugh, she loved to joke. I mean, we all did. And it was whether we could support her in that confidence to get to where she needed to be. And I mean, you see what she's doing now. I think she's flying. And honestly, she is one of the nicest people. I mean, she's crackers. Don't get me wrong, she's absolutely crackers. I remember she stayed at my house a few times because she lived in, oh God,
Whitby?
Where did she live? Yeah, is it Hinderwell or something like that? I think it was. But yeah, Whitby. And so when she was professional with the club, it was that season actually, and they would train on the morning, and it made no sense for her to travel back to then come back up the next morning. So I said, so she stayed at my house, and honestly, she was nuts. I remember getting a phone call once, and she was like, Jem, I've posted the key through your door, but I need to get back in. And I was like, I don't really know what you want me to do. I'm at work. So she had gone and she had found, I'm sure this is how it happened. She had found the site manager, or she had found someone, because I was on a new build estate. And they had like a big magnet or something, and they were trying to get the keys through my letterbox. So I went back on the night after work, and there's all these scratches up the inside of my door from where the keys had been scraping up and down the inside of the door. And, but I think that kind of sums her up. She was lovely girl, but yeah, crackers.
Yeah. I had a nice chat with her last summer, and yeah, she's good fun, and like a lot of the girls really down to earth and always kind of willing to have a chat. And I know our Katie's her biggest mate, her biggest fan, and she's always willing for a selfie and that. But you finished fifth. That was it. Fourth that year.
Fourth that year.
Fourth. So like definitely that kind of like best of the rest. Really putting ourselves up there amongst the real top teams in England, probably in Europe then at the time. So an excellent achievement. But that was the end of it for you playing.
Yeah.
What was it that was behind that decision? Was it just like you just needed to get on with your career outside of football, or was it physical, or what sat behind you calling it a day?
There was a few things, to be honest. So I didn't have the best season in terms of I didn't play very much. When I did play, I just didn't feel like I played very well. But I don't think I was mentally in the right space at that point. So it was just as we were about to start pre-season, I lost my dad, and I never really got back into it. So it was one of those where football was always a release, and it was always like the way to escape and deal with things. But my dad he worked at the club. So that place that was the escape then became the reminder.
Yeah.
So it was driven a bit by that. I think when I first went back and joined the girls, just before the season started, I think part of me already knew that was going to be it. I was under contract. I would do everything I could for the club, but I don't know, it didn't feel the same. And then, so I didn't play a huge amount that season. We had professional players in my position as well as kind of Steph, and I don't know, it didn't feel right for me to kind of still be there at that point. I think that was probably more my own kind of emotional space that I was in at that point rather than the reality. But then there was also the physical side of it as well. So I was playing, who was it against? I think it might have been against Everton. We're playing a cup game, one of the Conti Cup games at Hetton, and I went in on a challenge in the second half, and so I slid on my left hand side, and I can't even remember who it was now, but the player landed on my right hand side, and it opened up my shoulder joint. And we thought it was just bursitis. And so kept training, kept kind of playing if I was asked to play, but the shoulder was just getting worse and worse and worse. I had injections in it. It wasn't getting any better. Pretty much lost all movement in it. I couldn't do anything with it. And the season came to an end, and I got in touch with the PFA. And I went and saw an upper limb specialist, and actually I ended up needing quite a major operation on it, and it kind of all being pinned back together. It wasn't a joint anymore. It was just kind of there. So at that point, I still had, somewhere in the back of my head, I still had these ambitions of being a paramedic, and I thought it's getting to a point now where it's going to jeopardise any potential to do that. So if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably say it wasn't the right decision to drop out when I did. So it kind of depends when you ask me, and what kind of day I'm having, to be honest. But I think it was the right time for me emotionally at that point. I think it wasn't the release that it always had been. And then physically, after that shoulder operation, it was a 6 to 12 month recovery from that surgery anyway. So, I mean, by that point, I'd have been knocking on 30 before I'd even get back into any form of training again. So it probably was the right decision in hindsight.
Yeah, it sounds like it was one that was made in your best interests, certainly. And thanks for going into that, because it must be difficult to look back on. But you've gone on and you've had a career outside the game. You had ambitions to be paramedic at one point. You went to uni, and now you work in education. So can you tell listeners what it's been like as a kind of an ex-player, kind of building a career maybe a bit later than some of your peers, and what you're up to now?
So, to be honest with you, I don't think that I think because of my age group when we were coming through, so the likes of myself, Kelly, Steph, Vicky G, Kelly not so much, because she was obviously involved in that England setup and everything as well, but it wasn't really a thing we really thought about, football being a career, when we were kind of at that age of kind of 18 to 21 and thinking about university and what jobs we were going to go for. So it didn't hold us back as much as what you maybe would think in terms of, so that career in education, that kind of where I am now is probably where I would have been regardless of football. But in terms of that paramedic space, it definitely, I think I put off doing the paramedic stuff because I wasn't ready to give football up yet. And I think to go and do paramedics with the different shifts and the training and everything you would have needed to do, I don't think I'd have been able to do both. And at the point of choosing careers and paths to go down, I wasn't prepared to give football up yet. I needed it too much, if I'm honest. So I think it prevented me becoming a paramedic at that point, and then kind of circumstances around it has stopped me going any further with that. Really, I can't afford to go back to university and study again. The entry requirements have changed, and I couldn't afford to do that now. But I try to kind of stay with it as much as I can. So I do still volunteer with St John Ambulance. So when I stopped playing, I joined St John Ambulance. So I do get to have some level of experience, obviously not to the level of being a paramedic, but you know, it opens up opportunities to try to help and make a difference in other ways. So things like through COVID, St John Ambulance, we helped with vaccinations, we helped with, so up here we actually we volunteered in the QE in Gateshead. Right. So we were on the COVID wards, we were doing portering shifts, security shifts, just kind of meets and greets and supporting patients as they were coming in and out, and just with some patients who obviously they didn't have family, weren't able to visit because of the restrictions. So it was just kind of some days it was just sitting with patients and talking to them, so they had somebody to talk to. So it gives you, things like St John, it gives you that opportunity to do that. So although I haven't been able to go on and join the ambulance service in the capacity I wanted to, I've still got almost a link to it, and a bit of an opportunity through that way.
No, it sounds amazing. Sounds like you've been doing some really amazing work. It must have been a really tough time for anyone who's working in health and especially the great people like yourself who've been volunteering over the last couple of years. It's been a hell of a time for lots of people, but it's good that we've got people like yourself who will dedicate themselves to that. It's amazing. So back to football, I guess, and like now, obviously you know Mel, you played with Mel, you played with, I guess, Abby Joyce, Kia Ramshaw, young Emma Kelly as well. You when Emma
Kelly
came through. So
Meg Beer as well.
Yeah, Meg. And so what do you think of how the lasses are doing now? Obviously back again in Tier 2 after another kind of combination of abandonment by a club and the FA's licence requirements and stuff like that. What do you think of, obviously the season's just finished, it's been successful in terms of staying in Tier 2. What do you make of what Mel and Steph are doing there?
Joe, when I was talking earlier about when I first joined the women's setup, Mel was captain of the first team, so kind of knowing Mel from that space as a kind of my captain at that point, it was it's not really a surprise, to be honest. The expectations she puts on people, she wants excellence and she wants people to want to do well. So from that perspective, and obviously she's had a lot of experience working with Gateshead College and the teams there as well, it's not really a surprise what she's getting out of the players. And like you say, like Mel, obviously from that perspective, but then Kira, Meg, Emma Kelly, Joycey, playing alongside them, training with them, they've got the potential, they've got the ability. It's about just being given the opportunity, and they've got that now, and they're taking it. And again, lovely lasses, really down to earth. Meg Beer's probably one of those crazy ones, but I think actually is a story for you. So Kira, I remember Kira when she made her debut for us. I joke about this with her sometimes now still. She came on the pitch and she looked really shy. I think she was 16-year-old. She looked really shy, really nervous. And obviously me and Steph Bannon were playing centre half. She came on. She looked at the two of us, and to be honest with you, she looked petrified. So I just said to her, "Get stuck in, Keys. Don't worry about it. Just get stuck in." That cues Kira for 15 seconds later. So just coming onto the pitch, she just goes straight through somebody. Straight through them, yellow card straight away. She just turns around, looks at me and Bannon and just starts laughing. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is what we've got to look forward to now. But she's absolutely nuts. But she's a lovely, lovely girl. And I think with people like that, they've got that crazy streak in them, but they've also got that really caring side and supportive side. And I think when you've got a spine of players like that through the team, it helps bring on young players. And I know they've got a very young squad at the minute, the way we did, to be fair, back then. But what we had back then was different. So we had maybe 3-4 young players a season would come through and join, and we would all be experienced, whereas I think it's over the past couple of years it's been almost the reverse of that, and they've had a lot of young players with maybe 4 or 5 experienced players, but they've got huge potential in there as well. And as long as they've got that kind of that togetherness, that spirit, that desire to fight for the badge, they can do whatever they want to do, because a lot of players will come and go at other clubs. They'll have players who are technically better, tactically better, but if you want it more, that goes a lot further than the talent. And I mean, that's what we showed against the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea. We were up for it more, we wanted it more, we had each other's backs more. And I think someone like Mel leading them with Kira, with Emma Kelly, they'll have that in abundance through that team, and they'll not let that kind of standard drop. So I think they've got great things to come in future seasons. I really do. It's just whether or not we can keep that squad together and build and grow together.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be key, isn't it? Keeping those youngsters who are, a lot of them playing England age group level and stuff, keeping them at the club and giving them a career, because I guess that's what young female footballers are aiming for now. Is that career in the game, and because it's there for them and they can see it in front of them, and we've got the Euros coming up as well. Are you excited about the Lionesses? Are you with all your old muckers playing for them? Will you be at Old Trafford for the opener?
I won't be. No, I'll not be at the game. But it's so nice to go into an international tournament with that level of expectation. Mm-hmm. It's been a long time coming. It's been rumbling under the surface for quite a while, I think. But I think the quality of the players that are in and around that setup now. I think previously the squads were made up of players. I mean, this is just my personal view, but squads were made up of players who had always been there. Not necessarily informed players, not necessarily the best players. It was players who were known. And I think that setup now is built around who are the best players and how, or who are the best squad of players that can play together, and how do we complement each other the best. And I think when you've got people the likes of Mido, I mean, the form she's in is absolutely unbelievable. And it's really nice to see that the Old Sunderland girls doing that and being part of it and being quite a core and mainstream part of that. And yeah, it's going to be an exciting tournament. I think there's a great opportunity for England. It's whether or not they hold their nerve with it, but I think it's going to be very, very exciting. I really hope they do it, because it's probably one of the best opportunities they've had recently to go there and win it. Yeah,
it'll be massive for the game as well. It could give every club a huge boost. Exposing women's football to the whole attention of the whole country for a month. I think it's going to be massive. Even if England don't go all the way, and there's some amazing teams in Europe, it's just going to be very exciting to watch overall. Another exciting game, and I think we're both excited about it. I just got my tickets. We're at Wembley on Saturday.
Yes.
Cheesy chips and Wembley Way, is it? Is it a big weekend for you?
Yeah. So I can't get out of work on the Friday, so I'm going to miss the Trafalgar Square bit.
Yeah, me too.
I was so looking forward to that. But I'll be all over social media on Friday looking at what's going on and how it's looking. But yeah, I'm going down on one of the Al's coaches.
Oh, nice.
So I tried to get train tickets, to be honest with you, because I thought, I'll get there early, I'll soak up the atmosphere, it'll be great. I couldn't get a train ticket back. There's no fares. I just couldn't get back. So going down on one of the supporters coaches, be going down. I think the buses are leaving between 5 and 7. So we'll still be there early. So there'll be plenty of time to soak up the atmosphere, have some cheesy chips on Wembley Way, as you say. And do you know what it is? I'm not that superstitious in any part of life except for watching the men. And I have to go in exactly the same turnstile at the stadium. I have to arrive at about the same time. I have to go to the same cubicle in the toilets before the match starts. Same playlist on the journey to the stadium. Unless we lose, and then it all starts again and we find a new ritual. So I'm just over the moon that we're in the opposite side of Wembley. Yeah. So I've been to Wembley 3 times. The first one was the Charlton playoff final in the 97-98 season. That was torturous. Great game, mind. Torturous, but great game. Then I went to the Man City League Cup final, and then I was at the Charlton playoff final, and I've sat in relatively similar seats for every game. Obviously it was at different Wembleys, but generally speaking, pitch view, it was about the same. And obviously we lost all of them, didn't we? So I'm just glad we're over the other side of the stadium this year. Oh yes, I get nervous talking about it already. No, so it's ridiculous.
So do I. Making me nervous talking about it. I was confident. No, but it's gonna be a great week for Sunderland fans in the lead up to that. Thank you for your time and your stories and the kind of the benefit of your experience in the game. It's an exciting time for Sunderland Football Club, for women's football. So yeah, thanks a lot, Gemma, for your time this morning, and all the best for the weekend.
Thank you. Yes, let's hope that we win as well.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks everyone for listening, as well as obviously loads of coverage of both the men and the women on the Ruck Report website. We'll be doing more of these interviews, hopefully, with more people who've been involved with Sunderland AFC, ladies of Sunderland women over the course of the last kind of 3 decades or so on our new podcast. So thanks everyone, and see you all later. Chemistry, biology, toxic misogyny, still haven't had a single